This framework establishes precise demographic thresholds that define the operational health of a white ethnostate. It divides the population percentage of European-descended individuals into 4 distinct zones: safe, warning, danger, and emergency, each carrying specific implications for policy, governance, and corrective action. The model recognizes that real-world geography, regional demographics, and local conditions introduce necessary flexibility, yet the thresholds remain universal benchmarks applicable across America and every white European country. By anchoring the framework in observable historical patterns where homogeneity above 90% sustained cultural stability, while declines below that level accelerated erosion, the system provides a clear, measurable roadmap for maintaining white identity. The safe zone. 90 to 100% white. The safe zone encompasses territories where the population is between 90 and 100% white. Within this range, homogeneity is sufficiently high to maintain cultural continuity, low internal friction, and effective governance without discernible disruption from the remaining multicultural minority. At 100%, certain communities may exist as explicitly white-only enclaves where residents choose absolute purity for ideological, familial, or security reasons. These 100% white communities function as cultural anchors within the broader ethnostate, off-limits to non-whites while still integrated into the overall framework. The 90 to 100% range allows controlled inclusion of married, mixed, merged, and allies of whites, AOW, individuals within the 10% non-white portion. This minority consists of varied groups rather than a single block, preserving the ethnostate's character while permitting limited utility-based participation. Geographic variation is expected. Some regions may sustain 99 or 100% whiteness, while others stabilize at 92 to 95%. The closer one moves toward the conceptual center of the ethnostate, whether that center is a mountain stronghold, coastal stronghold, or national heartland, the higher the white percentage becomes. This gradient is common knowledge. Non-whites understand that certain central zones are more exclusively white, subject to stricter local leadership, and may impose access restrictions even if non-whites are permitted in peripheral areas. The safe zone thus represents the operational ideal where the ethnostate functions at peak cohesion. The warning zone. 80 to 90% white. When the white population falls to 80 to 90%, the territory enters the warning zone. At this level, homogeneity remains the majority but the multicultural presence, 10 to 20%, begins to exert measurable pressure on resources, culture, and social trust. Corrective evaluation becomes necessary, though not yet emergency-level intervention. Regional and temporal factors determine severity. Outlying border communities or recently incorporated areas may tolerate higher non-white percentages without immediate crisis, while core territories must remain above 85% to avoid slippage. In the warning zone, married, mixed, merged, and AOW categories still constitute the majority of the non-white population, but their presence requires tighter monitoring. The framework permits flexibility. Geographic distance from the ethnostate center may justify slightly elevated non-white ratios in peripheral zones, yet any sustained drop below 85% triggers mandatory review of immigration, birth rates, and internal loyalty. Historical patterns show that once a white society crosses below 90%, decline accelerates unless deliberate countermeasures are applied. The warning zone therefore functions as an early alert threshold, prompting preemptive policies such as incentivized white relocation, family formation programs, and stricter classification enforcement to restore the safe zone before danger materializes. The danger zone. 75 to 80% white. Below 80% whiteness, the territory enters the danger zone, 75 to 80% white. At this point, the multicultural share, 20 to 25%, disrupts the ethnostate's ability to maintain cultural dominance and institutional control. Social trust erodes, resource allocation becomes contested, and external influences gain disproportionate leverage. The danger zone is not yet absolute emergency, but it demands urgent, coordinated correction. Regional variation still applies. Remote outposts may temporarily operate at 78% without collapse, but core areas cannot remain in this zone without risking irreversible shift. Analytical tools from the internal hierarchy guide response. whiteness percentage and skin tone compatibility are used to reclassify mixed, married, merged, and AOW populations, prioritizing repatriation or relocation of lower-tier elements. The danger zone signals that the ethnostate's protective mechanisms are under strain. Historical precedents confirm that societies hovering near 80% homogeneity experience rapid polarization unless decisive action restores the majority. In this conceptual framework, the danger zone triggers mandatory demographic audits, family formation incentives, and boundary enforcement to arrest decline before crossing into emergency territory. The emergency zone. Below 75% white. Any territory falling below 75% white enters absolute emergency status. At this threshold, the multicultural presence exceeds 25% and the white population loses the numerical and cultural capacity to dictate societal norms. Institutions fragment, safety declines, and external groups dominate decision-making. The 75% line marks the point where historical patterns show irreversible tipping. Once breached, decline spirals toward minority status. Immediate, drastic measures, mass relocation programs, territorial reclamation, and intensified internal purification are required to reverse course. The emergency zone activates the full defensive architecture of the framework. White race traders, already the paramount internal threat, receive heightened scrutiny because their actions accelerate entry into this zone. Collective family accountability and banishment protocols are enforced to remove both traders and their potential descendants. Geographic centers must be secured first, concentrating pure white populations while peripheral zones are temporarily sacrificed if necessary. The emergency zone is not a sustainable state. It demands total mobilization to restore at least warning zone levels within the shortest feasible time frame. Integration with the white ethnostate hierarchy and adversarial dynamics. These percentage thresholds integrate directly with the internal hierarchy and inverted adversary ranking. In safe zone territories, 90 to 100%, the hierarchy operates at peak efficiency. Pure whites exercise unchallenged leadership, mixed and AOW elements remain limited and beneficial, and white-only communities flourish. As percentages drop into warning and danger zones, the hierarchy tightens, reclassifying lower-tier mixed and married individuals and restricting AOW access, while adversary monitoring intensifies. White race traders remain the supreme threat at every level. Their exposure and removal is the fastest path back to safe zone status. The conceptual center of the ethnostate, regardless of its literal geography, functions as the purity gradient. White percentages increase and non-white access decreases as one approaches the center. Non-whites understand that certain central zones are off-limits or heavily restricted, even while peripheral areas permit limited presence. This gradient reinforces the hierarchy's logic and the adversary framework's prioritization of internal traders. By maintaining clear percentage metrics, the ethnostate possesses a universal diagnostic instrument that applies equally in American heartlands, European nations, or any white country, ensuring consistent, measurable progress toward full homogeneity. Strategic recommendations and universal applicability. Implementation begins with baseline demographic audits at individual, community, and national levels. Communities in the safe zone focus on maintaining or increasing whiteness through family incentives and controlled AOW inclusion. Warning zone areas initiate corrective relocation and birth rate programs. Danger zone territories activate emergency classification reviews and boundary enforcement. Emergency zone regions require total mobilization, including mass repatriation and intensified trader accountability. The framework's universality stems from its modular design. A single family in a multicultural suburb can apply the thresholds locally by choosing neighborhoods above 90% white. Regional networks coordinate at the warning/danger levels. National coordination enforces emergency measures. Every white country adopts the identical metric, 90 to 100% safe, 80 to 90% warning, 75 to 80% danger, below 75% emergency, while allowing geographic flexibility. White-only 100% communities exist as optional purity enclaves within the safe zone, providing cultural strongholds without disrupting the broader ethnostate. Through these percentage thresholds, the conceptual framework transforms abstract preservation goals into concrete, measurable policy. It ensures that the white ethnostate remains not merely an ideal but an achievable, defendable reality, where every demographic shift is anticipated, evaluated, and corrected before it threatens the core identity. Conclusion: conceptual core of the white ethnostate demographic framework. This model provides a precise, historically grounded system for safeguarding white European-descended identity and societal coherence through clearly defined demographic health zones. Rooted in the observed reality that very high homogeneity historically ensured cultural stability, minimal internal friction, and effective self-governance, the framework sets universal benchmarks adaptable to any American region or European nation while allowing for geographic and local variation. In the optimal range, near-total demographic dominance sustains unbroken cultural continuity, high social trust, efficient institutions, and natural purity gradients, with central strongholds functioning as the most exclusive zones and limited, functionally useful non-white presence tolerated on the periphery without eroding core character. As multicultural share increases and white proportion declines, early stress appears, requiring vigilant monitoring, proactive family and relocation policies, and tighter controls to reverse trend before serious disruption occurs. Further decline brings acute pressure on cultural authority, institutional integrity, and social cohesion, demanding urgent reclassification, boundary hardening, and prioritized corrective measures to prevent irreversible tipping. Below the critical threshold, numerical and cultural control collapses, institutions fracture, external influence dominates, and full emergency protocols, mass reclamation, intensified internal purification, and ruthless accountability for traitors become mandatory to reclaim defensible core territory. Integrated with a strict internal hierarchy, the system functions as a modular, diagnostic, and actionable tool, from individual neighborhood selection to national mobilization, turning abstract preservation into solid, measurable policy that anticipates, evaluates, and corrects demographic threats to ensure the white ethnostate remains viable and enduring.